Jeff.
And he's Michael.
And that's totally corny.
I'm glad you played that. I haven't got to hear it for a while.
Yes, like old times. Loud rock and roll music in the morning. nothing like to wake you up. Nothing like it to wake you up. Oh, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you as well. How are things going?
That's a loaded question. I could take the rest of the time just to answer that. Things are going fine.
Okay.
God is in control.
That is correct.
Some things are going perfectly according to him. I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, but I am no longer employed at the network.
I assumed at some point that might happen, but I didn't realize that had already happened. So.
It just happened in March, and and I won't bore you with all the details, but it was one of those where, I knew it was going to come. I'd survived 3 rounds of layoffs, and it's like, well, will there be another round? Probably. Will I survive that one? I don't know. And I didn't.
Okay.
And we as humans, you can't prepare your emotional reaction for a thing, right? You just can't prepare. A thing happens and it's just going to hit you a certain way. And because I had already kind of anticipated that it was going to happen at some point, and because I've been super busy with my other thing that's getting a lot of traction, I'm becoming a recognizable public figure in certain spheres, public intellectual, especially about Solomon Tehlirian, Armenian genocide studies, etc. I'm like, okay, I'm super busy with that. So when the moment happened, and the way it happens is you get an email. If you get an email from a particular person, right? It's like you never get an email from that person, and everybody knows if you get an email, that's your last second. You've just been terminated, right? So it happened. And the emotion was, I'm not kidding, giddiness.
Really?
Right? The initial shock, it's like, a paradigm shift has just happened in my life. Making ends meet is no longer a reality, right? It's like all of that. Like, my day in and day out is dramatically altered and shifted.
Right.
Which means now I can do all this other stuff that has been on the back burner, that's been piling up, that I got volunteer team members, blah, blah, blah. I have this one person who's like a chief of staff / producer. When I told her, she goes, good, now I can get you in meetings, blah, blah, blah. Right. I was like, oh, okay. And honestly, within 4 days, I was sitting across from a billionaire, right? Discussing, okay, this is what you want to see in the documents here. We'll work on it. Right. So all of that. So it may sound like, 2 other guys got let go the same day I did, and the contrast in our demeanors, going around the office saying bye to everyone. It's my last day. They were like, I got let go today, and I'm going like, hey everybody, hey, it's my last day. Just let you know, bye. Right? I'm like, all right. I literally like, so you ask how it's going. That's
just cool to hear, and I mean, I have not had the I don't have a job anymore phenomena. I don't know what that would be like in my realm. Like you said, I can intellectually prepare. I don't know how emotionally I would handle, but there is just, I see in you a sense of, okay, God's doing something. Let's go do that. And you may not have all the answers yet, but it's certainly He's at work. And so I am learning and developing that, trying to develop that character as well. And so it's cool to hear.
Well, in particular, knowing the way God works. So it's like I had just had on March 15th. So it was like March 18th, I think, was it Tuesday, 18th or 19th was the day it happened. On March 15th, I had just had a big event, and I had invited you to it. I know you're, but UCLA professor Taner Akçam, the first Turkish historian to openly teach the Armenian genocide, right? Iconic historic character, had teamed up with me for an event. Like he agreed to be an event. And I had a bunch of influential Armenian friends in the audience. And so it was like a seminal moment. It was like a peak moment thus far in my project, as far as for my public credibility, being the public, figure. So it was like, I can't believe this happened. It went so well. Tonner said yes, blah, blah, blah. And then 3 days later, I lose my job. Those seminal moments so close together. It's like God going, hello, hello, I'm doing hello. It's like you'd be an idiot to ignore that God is actually orchestrating all of these things. So that was the combination of why I was like kind of floating around going, oh, this is a good day. I'm happy. I will never be able to walk on this studio lot again, but that's not, I shouldn't say never, but I did go on the whole lot and I normally would do a walk, sometimes daily, but regularly I just take a walk around the lot. That time I took out my camera and just filmed the whole thing. It was a ghost town. I think a lot of people were getting axed that day. It was like a ghost town. All right. So, all right, enough chit chat.
Okay.
What are we talking about today, Jeff? I know you gave me a list of things. Why don't we start with the space junk thing? That's the title.
The space junk. Yeah, well, so turns out that when we launch stuff up into space, it kind of stays up there for a while. And every now and again, the specific interest in this discussion today, or the specific event that happened, was there was a Soviet rocket that was launched way back in 1972 that had been floating around up in Earth orbit. Originally, they think it was a satellite that was designed to be launched into orbit and then launched to Venus, because that was right in the era, the Venera probes, where they were launching and landing on Venus. And actually, the only instruments that have ever taken a picture from the surface of Venus and sent it back were the Venera probes. And so it was something in that class. And it seems like whatever happened, it malfunctioned and never did launch, and so it's just been sitting up there orbiting for the last I guess 50 some odd years now. Well, its orbit has decayed enough that it's going to start entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's about a little over 1,000 pounds. And so my interest in it was, wait a second, 1,000 pounds, something that's designed to withstand coming into Venus and to survive. That's a pretty dense atmosphere, a lot of friction there. This thing, probably parts of it will make it back down to the surface of the Earth. And so I was kind of thinking, oh, that would just really stink to have your day. As improbable as space junk landing on the Earth is, that would just really stink to be the one person who actually gets hit by this stuff.
Right, the odds. Right.
Yeah,
that would be God singling you out for sure. That would be God going, I'm knocking you down with this piece of junk, right?
I mean, it really is. I mean, you think, okay, I was just doing a little bit of calculations in my head. The surface of the Earth, it's about 25,000. Let's see, I guess you could, if you do the calculations, the Earth is about 4,000 miles in radius. 4 pi r squared to get the surface area. You do that, that's a very small number of, then you say, okay, there's 7 or 8 billion people on the planet. That's a very small fraction of the planet do people occupy, of the surface area.
Yep.
I mean, just for scale, 70+% of our planet's surface is water, and nobody lives on the water, or virtually nobody. So, I mean, it's just incredibly rare that something would actually hit. But it did get me thinking. I mean, it's like, it's rare, but that doesn't give you any consolation if you're the one who actually gets hit. And I think at some point, somebody's going to get hit, it seems to me, because there's quite a bit of space junk up there.
Rare things happen all the time, right? Rare things happen. Just because it's improbable doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Well, you're nerding out and showing off. Yeah, the pi r squared and radius times blah. Yeah. That's where I tuned out, right? And I know from you that's like elementary, right? That's why I'm saying you're showing off. But I'm going to go on a tangent here.
Okay.
That what you just did, that calculation, I did it in a slightly different way. Like 30 years ago, when I was kind of waking up from my, I guess, liberal leftist stupor. I was, grew up when I would be with my dad, I would read a bunch of his, or listen to him, and he had some comic books about the end of the world, like environmentalism, etc. Like, we're destroying ourselves, doomsday, this and that. And overpopulation was the big scare, right? Humans can't continue growing and populating. We're overpopulated. The planet is
Mhm.
overpopulated already, etc. And the crazy schemes that people have, the ideal population of the planet is 500 million. That's the ideal population. I'm like, how do you come to that number? Et cetera, et cetera. And are you really saying we need to eliminate 7.5 billion people in order to get to that 500 million? Right? All that kind of talk. So I just did a simple.
But did Thanos do those calculations?
Right. So I did some quick calculations very simply. I'm like, all right, at the time, maybe I rounded up to 7 billion, or I mean 8 billion, maybe it was 7 billion at the time. I just did a calculation. Oh, let's take every human and give them 1 square yard.
Mm-hmm.
What's the square yardage of 7 billion people? And
Right.
they all fit in the state of Rhode Island.
No, that's a small state too. So that's
It's the smallest in the union, right?
yeah.
Maybe Hawaii, I don't know. But it's like that's every person on the planet shoulder to shoulder because you just 1 square yard. But
Yeah.
physically, every human fit in the smallest
Mm.
state in the United States, just for reference. I'm like, so when you look at the planet, you're like, oh yeah, there's pockets of cities where the people accumulate and gather. But this really was driven home when I took my first trip overseas to Europe. Just all the different flights we were on, flying over all this gorgeous, lush green, and like little pockets of civilization here and there. I'm like, yeah, we got plenty of room. The planet is not overpopulated. We got plenty of room. And I know one of the arguments is consuming resources, blah, blah, blah. And it's like with inventions, we become more efficient. It's like we're not consuming the same amount of resources. We don't all need fossil fuels. The poorest people still need fossil fuels because it's the cheapest. But once you get people up to a certain economic status, the energy costs and uses of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So it's a huge tangent. But I do want to get back to space junk. There's a lot of stuff out there, and you used the phrase orbital decay. It's like, is it something out there rotting in space? Explain.
Oh yeah,
I know what it means.
yeah.
Explain.
So you got something up in space, and basically there's a certain amount of energy associated with any orbit, and as something loses energy, there's atmosphere even up in space. There's still atmosphere, so you're slowing down slowly, and just over time, as you lose energy, your decay gets closer and closer to your orbit gets closer and closer to. That's what orbital decay is, and so you could imagine stuff that's in lower Earth orbit, it's going to be encountering more friction in its orbit. That energy is going to be absorbed from the orbit, and it will slowly fall back to Earth, is what it amounts to. And so that's what orbital decay means.
And that's an inevitability. Is that an inevitability for everything that's in Earth orbit? Or do things ever escape Earth's orbit, right? Are the things out there on that threshold where they end up wandering off into space forever? Or does everything that's in the gravitational pull eventually decay and come down?
It eventually will decay and come down because you actually have to give it the energy to get out of there. That's why we put these things on rockets and launch them up there. Is that you throw a ball up, it comes back down. You throw a satellite up there, it comes back down. You actually you can calculate how much energy that is, and you can give a satellite enough energy that it will escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. We've done that with I don't know. It's more than 5 and less than 1,000. I don't know what the number is, where we've launched satellites out of Earth's orbit, so they're no longer going to fall back to Earth. But you have to give it that amount of energy. There's virtually no process out in space that would give it that amount of energy or add energy to it without destroying the components or destroying its capacity to do what its intended purpose was. Because you have to have collisions happen, and anything that collides out in space tends to cause a lot of damage. In fact, that's one of the catastrophic worries, is that if you get too much stuff up there, there's just so much space debris that every collision causes a bunch more junk, which causes more collision, which causes more junk, which causes more collision. Eventually, it just becomes uninhabitable, or not uninhabitable, but impossible to put stuff up in space that isn't going to get destroyed. Now, that's pretty catastrophic, and we're a long ways from that. But that's the way life works out in space, if you will.
I was just about to make a comment, but Robin's got one here. We have a floating junkyard orbiting our planet. It's all the crap we've launched. So, question on that note: everything that's orbiting, that we've put up, we've intentionally put it in orbit, right? We put it there intentionally, right? Satellites, I guess. Is that? I mean, that's pretty much all we launch up there is satellites, right? What else is there to put in orbit?
No, it's pretty much well, anything we launch is called a satellite. So yes, anything we put up there has been. I mean, there is rocks, and I mean, we go through. Halley's Comet leaves a trail that we go through. That's why we see the meteor shower certain times of the year. Those sorts of things happen. So there is junk that's not human
Got it.
It's not human originated, but
Launched,
yes, all the stuff we've launched up there is either still up there or its orbit has decayed, that it has re-entered the atmosphere. And that is one kind of cool thing about this, is that things are going so fast when they come through the atmosphere. I mean, you've all seen, Apollo 13, where it's coming down through and you got this big fireball. Well, that we build shields so that the people behind that don't get incinerated. But when stuff comes through, it largely incinerates, and our atmosphere pretty much roasts all of that sort of stuff so that it never makes it to the earth.
Right. And that, that was a moment of dawning of understanding what a vacuum is versus an atmosphere. It's like, okay, so there's nothing out there, and the comparison between the vacuum and an oxygen or a gaseous atmosphere, it's like scraping your elbow on asphalt, right? It's like the difference between your soft skin and a concrete. It's friction. So something coming into our atmosphere at a high velocity that hits the molecules of the oxygen it just starts to rub and scrape and burn away.
Yeah.
So it's like,
it's pretty dramatic to see. In fact, I remember being down in Arizona, because one of the telescopes I worked on was down in southern Arizona, and happened to be where the space shuttle was landing, and it was landing at night. And there was just this large red vapor trail just tracking across the sky. And it's like, that's a lot of energy to be depositing in the atmosphere, that it just glows red for quite a while.
Right. Wow.
That was one of those cool, I can't believe I actually got to see that moments in my life.
So the vast majority of that junk is just going to vaporize eventually as its orbit decays, right? But you were indicating that particular rocket was designed to handle entering a dense or atmosphere,
right?
The one we're talking about. So it most likely will survive all the way to the ground, but the probability of it landing on a person is remote.
That's basically the way to look at it. Yeah. In fact, if you go out and you say, what's our worry with space junk? The worry isn't really that it's going to hit somebody or cause damage on Earth. It's that the more stuff we put up there, our capacity to view out into the heavens is increasingly diminished. And it's kind of this odd tension, because, you got Elon Musk, I think Amazon, I know China, India, want to put up these large constellation of satellites in order to provide worldwide internet access, so that everybody's got cheap, good internet access, because internet access gives you access to information and resources. The process of doing that means you're now littering the sky. So by doing this one good thing, you actually have this consequence from an astronomical perspective of you're littering the sky with junk that impedes our ability to see out into the heavens. And so you've got these two good endeavors wanted to do that are in conflict with one another. And if we just launch the things that people have thought about and are actually working on and actually starting to do, it's going to significantly hamper our ability to do certain kinds of astronomy, and we just won't be able to do them anymore.
What I don't know if there's data on this, but do you know what percentage of the junk is junk and what percentage of the junk is actually in use, functional?
So that's a little hard to quantify, because if you just go by pieces, there's a whole lot more that's just junk, because as stuff breaks up, you get a whole lot of smaller pieces. I think if you go by mass, we're probably half the stuff up there is being used, half of it's, something like that. It may be 1 part in 10, but to an astronomer, that's the same order of magnitude. We're in good shape. 1/10 and a half is the same thing in my book. So it's something where it's kind of comparable, the amount that's actually usable to the amount that's old and going to burn up at some point in time.
I don't know if you recall or had ever heard this news item. It was maybe 10 years ago. There was this some kid, I don't know, he was a high school kid, and came up with an invention that apparently, was pretty functional about collecting crap in the ocean. Right.
Right.
This invention that was just really cleaning up. It was like nobody ever thought we'd ever really have a way to do it. And this kid came up with something, and I think it was put into use. And you think there's at some point somebody's going to stumble across some way to go and eradicate the space junk, the non-used percentage of the stuff that's orbiting the Earth, or I don't know if
that's an interesting question. So I'm just thinking that from the technological challenges is that one, getting stuff up into space to do that is expensive to start with. So
right.
Just get by that. Now you've got to get up in space, and you realize, you take the Earth, orbit of the Earth, or the radius of the Earth is, I'm going to do my calculation again here on, just to kind of give a sense of it, because the problem you have is it's scattered all over the orbit up there. And so you have to be able to get between it. That's the problem with cleaning up stuff in the ocean.
The space between it is,
Exactly. So you got to be able to do something that can actually get between. And that all requires energy, because you've got to course correct and get stuff around. So and then once you get to the thing, you have to do something with it. And what do you do with it? Well, most likely the thing you want to do is just cause it to go into a quickly decaying orbit so that it'll get burned up fairly quickly. And so I think if I were thinking about that, the thing I would try and do is there something I could put up there that causes an unusual large amount of drag but doesn't have a lot of mass? So can I throw up, I don't know, maybe you just have to do this for, because this will cause other problems, but, can I throw up this
I got the wheels turning now.
Debris of a bunch of dust, if you will, that will, for some reason, is attracted to the metallic space junk up there, that once it is collected around it, it causes it to slow down. And so
it weighs it down and drags it.
Space junk pulls the dust out of the atmosphere, or out of the orbits, and the dust pulls the space junk, and it all causes it to be vaporized. Now you can see there, that's a large amount of money, or it's going to take a lot of resources to figure out how to develop something like that. But that's actually kind of a cool project now that I think about it.
Well, what we're doing is science fiction. That's right. Thinking about it, and like, that's my preferred kind of science fiction. I'm more in, I don't know. I did like in Interstellar. That's the fiction side of science fiction, but the Mars,
the Martian,
that's the science, the more factual, even though there was some fiction there. So we're I'm tapping into, hey, maybe there's a story there, but sometimes it may lead to something. However, is there really a big concern? I mean, for example, when they do a launch, do they have to look and see if there's going to be debris passing across where they decide to launch? Is it like, are they able to calculate how much, like if a rocket's going up and there's some tiny space debris, does it just kind of go away? Or is it like, or does it hit it and incinerate, or is that much of a danger? I don't know.
No, those are the kinds of dangers that you have to worry about. So one, you have to be able to know that it's there and track it. And that's one of the cool things about being out in space, is that there's not a lot of interaction. So once you find the piece of space junk and get its orbit or trajectory calculated, you can calculate where it's going to be at an arbitrary time in the future, at least on the hundreds.
Right.
I don't know. Right. At some point, your calculations become inaccurate, but not in the time scale. Yeah. Now, the smaller the piece of junk, the harder it is to find, and it grows exponentially as well, or geometrically. So you got to worry about that. But yes, we do have to, when we have satellites up there, we have to know, okay, there's this piece of space junk, we've got to maneuver around it, because typically things are moving at pretty high velocities. And when you have things hit at high velocities, little things cause lots of damage. And so, yeah, we routinely, and routinely is kind of like a couple of times a day to every few days, we have to maneuver ships around stuff. So it is something we have to very diligently keep track of.
For example, the International Space Station, I mean, what do they do when debris is coming their way, right? Or is it in an orbit
That's an interesting question, because I have the suspicion that the components of the space station are designed to be able to get hit and not have any problems. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, you can imagine the modules that you're putting up there, they've got a shell on them that is pretty durable, because they know that's going to happen, and you cannot afford to have a hole put in one of those things, because that's really bad for the people inside. Whereas a lot of the stuff we put up there is how little mass can we put up there and have it be functioning, because whether it has an atmosphere, or it doesn't have to have oxygen, or an oxygen atmosphere around it for it to work, and so you don't have to worry about things. So I don't think that's as big a concern with the space station. It can actually hit a fair amount of stuff before it's a problem. I don't know what the size is, where the size and the velocity where it becomes a problem. That is certainly something you have to think about.
Gotcha. Well, we could go on in this topic, but we got a couple. I'm going to shift gears. Is there life on K2-18b JWST?
I think it's K12-18b, or no, it is K2-18b. You're right. I sent that over then. Well, so the interesting thing is, we found this gas in the atmosphere with the James Webb Space Telescope. So it's really, the James Webb is showing what it's capable of doing, because this is a difficult detection. And I think 3 different instruments on the telescope found it. So this is a pretty robust detection of dimethyl sulfide. Okay, so what's dimethyl sulfide? Well, it is a component of Earth's atmosphere that is 2 things. One, it's only produced biologically here on Earth, and it is easily destroyed. So the fact that there's dimethyl sulfide in our environment means that bacteria, or there are organisms that are producing the dimethyl sulfide, and they're replenishing it, because it is rapidly, within days, it is tends to be dissipated, because it's that reactive. And so that's the exciting part of finding it on this particular world. If I remember correctly, this is a dwarf star. So it's much smaller than the sun, which means planets are going to orbit much more closely, but it's on a planet that is in the habitable zone around that kind of star, where it's far enough away that liquid water in principle could exist. And they think it's probably covered by a large ocean of water, so this is why it's exciting, if you will. The bottom line is, the dimethyl sulfide detection is robust. I'm convinced that they've actually detected it. Is it a sign of life? Almost certainly not, because I think, to me, the most telling thing is that if dimethyl sulfide was produced and it was being dissipated, or it was converted into something else, you'd see the products as well. And I don't think they see the products of that as well. So probably there's an abiotic way of producing it on this planet, and it probably resides in the atmosphere far more abundantly, because what in the sun and the Earth system causes it to degrade here is no longer applicable, and so it sticks around a lot longer. But they actually found about 1,000 times more of this stuff in this planet's atmosphere than we have on Earth. So if that's life, there's a huge amount of life that is producing this.
Well, you threw in a little phrase there, in the habitable zone. Is that laziness on your part, or is that just what so if we go out there, we could inhabit that zone? We could just be in that habitable zone?
Well, I don't know. Laziness is not the right word, but you're highlighting something very important. It sounds like, habitable. This is like, let's go live there.
Yeah.
All that means is it is a scientific term with a pretty technical definition. The habitable zone is
Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, if you're too close to the star, the atmosphere is going to be way too hot and water will evaporate. If you're too far away, it's going to be way too cold and it will all freeze. The habitable zone is the in between those two zones where liquid water could exist.
Yeah.
Whether liquid water exists is an entirely different question.
So
but at least in principle, it could happen.
The phrase is tied to the existence of water. I
Yes,
didn't actually know that.
That
but
specific one is. Yes.
It's where water can exist, the habitable zone. All right. Well, thank you, Professor. Good to see you, my friend.
These are fun discussions because I've noticed how often things are said, and it may not actually be that. It leaves a wrong impression often. So
yeah, the laymen think habitable zone. Of course, there's life out there. There's so many habitable zones. Life must exist. All right. Got to go. Love you.
Love you too.
Month. All right. Bye. End stream. Bye, everybody.